Money Arata. Get ready, as I'm gonna tell you a little secret about Bitcoin and investing in cryptocurrencies. I know that some influential people may be upset with me for spreading the information that they keep away from you, or that they don't tell you simply because they don't even understand it themselves. But I emphasize that here, I just don't want to pick a fight with anyone. This is simply important information that you deserve to know. This little secret starts with those influencers who are always talking about investing in crypto on social media. Attention! Be very careful when influencers shill you the new best crypto of the week, saying that this crypto will make a lot of money for anyone who bets on it. The first warning sign that you need to be aware of is that no one has the power to predict the future, let alone price. Even worse is when influencers refrain from telling you about a crucial little secret, which is the difference between network architectures. And why is it a little secret? Why is it that few people talk about it? Well, network architecture is a technical topic from the realm of computer science. It is not the kind of discussion you're going to see an influencer explain to you. Chances are they don't understand it either. Now, with that being said, network architecture is not a complex subject that you could never understand. On the contrary, it is a subject that you must understand in order to make conscious choices. Now, my mission here at Arata Academy is to explain complex subjects to you in a way that it is easy to understand. And in order to explain the practical impact of network architecture, we're going to do an exercise in imagination. Imagine that you've been hearing about Bitcoin for a long time and you're interested in buying it. Perhaps you've heard an excited friend tell you that he's multiplied his money in a short period of time. Or maybe your interest in Bitcoin is actually for you to protect your wealth against inflation. Whatever the reason, if you open the website of an exchange, you can end up paralyzed with a huge amount of cryptocurrencies available. Many of these cryptos are even more profitable than Bitcoin in the short term. Now, although Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, we're going to separate it for the purpose of our conversation. So on the one side, there is Bitcoin, and then on the other side, there are all the other cryptos. For a little while, I'll explain to you the reason for this classification. Now, a question you may be having is whether it is better for you to buy Bitcoin or one of these thousands of different cryptocurrencies. Is investing in crypto a good idea for your profile? Only you can know the answer, making a well-informed and enlightened decision after educating yourself. First, understand that there are basically two types of architecture: centralized architecture and decentralized architecture. Centralized architecture is the one that has an owner, an entity, a group with final decision-making power. For you to protect yourself from arbitrary and unilateral orders from power holders, you need a decentralized currency, and today Bitcoin is the only option. This makes Bitcoin a strong currency. If you, number one, don't need a hard currency because you just want to speculate in the short term. Number two, understand the disadvantages of using centralized currencies. And three, also know how to manage your risk. Maybe you can consider cryptocurrency speculation. But even if you choose this path, always remember that you're putting money in cryptocurrencies that have an owner. And we're going to explain the risk of this activity. To be truly decentralized, a cryptocurrency cannot have masters who control it. There cannot be a person, a group of people who impose changes on the future of the currency, who have pre-mined it, who can change the monetary policy at any time. Now pay close attention. I'm going to be explaining to you all of this in detail, and information will make you look at these centralized cryptocurrencies with different eyes. Bitcoin is different because of the network effects, decentralization, immutable monetary policy, and true scarcity. Now, with regard to the network effects, basically the greater the number of network participants, the greater the value of the network. Bitcoin has the largest and oldest community of developers. There are brilliant and dedicated educators who help to explain how Bitcoin works. There are manufacturers of specialized hardware, and an entire ecosystem of people willing and helping to make Bitcoin adoption simpler than ever. Bitcoin's decentralization means that there is no single point of attack, no specific point of vulnerability. Transaction records are immutable. There is no board of directors of Bitcoin that can be sued. There is no pre-mining. It is impossible for anyone to uninvent Bitcoin. And above all, there is no small group of individuals with the power to determine what the future of your money will be. Only with decentralization do you have sovereignty of your own money. In this episode of the Money Arata series, we're going to detail the difference between Bitcoin, the best example in human history of a decentralized currency, and other cryptocurrencies that are centralized. This is a conversation with a large amount of content and plenty of grounded theory and rationale without hype, exaggeration, or price predictions. I respect your intelligence and your ability to understand the huge practical difference between centralized and decentralized architecture so you can make conscious choices and well-informed choices about where to invest and where to speculate. This is not financial advice. Please read the full disclaimer before proceeding. Bitcoin is different. More than different, it is unique and part of a financial asset class that is distinct from cryptos. Bitcoin has real scarcity, even though new cryptocurrencies appear all the time. An indisputable advantage of Bitcoin is that it is scarce. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. Putting Bitcoin in the same categories of other cryptocurrencies is a conceptual error. And it is very common. Nothing prevents people from creating infinite types of coins. There are already thousands of cryptocurrencies in circulation on the market, and new ones will continue to emerge. Because of this, some people get confused and they are under the false impression that Bitcoin's scarcity is relative. Believe it or not, some people have told me the following nonsense. Oh, yeah, yes, I understand there will be 21 million Bitcoins, but, people can create another 50 million puppy cat coin, 1 billion whatever coin, 500 billion pyramid coins. That is, the amount of cryptocurrencies is infinite. Now, attention. This is a conceptual error that needs to be clarified. The emergence of other cryptocurrencies does not reduce Bitcoin's scarcity, as they are two distinct asset classes. Bitcoin is unique. One of the several blog articles explaining this is from Nick Bhatia, saying that Bitcoin and crypto are not the same thing. Jimmy Song also has an informative and easy to understand blog article about how Bitcoin is different. Now, if you think that blog posts have little value because of the subjective viewpoint of a single author, don't worry. I'll give you a link to a government agency that basically says the same thing. Now, what are these different asset classes? To make it easier for you to understand, think about the difference between investing in gold and investing in a company's shares. For a moment, forget about the gold certificate or even the stock exchange traded gold funds. Think of gold as a golden coin. When you buy a gold coin, you have bought a precious metal. And there is no annual meeting or there is no report from the board of directors of gold. The shares of companies are securities. Because when you buy shares, you buy a small piece of participation in a company. And that is why there is the Securities and Exchange Commission that creates several rules for companies to be responsible in their relationships with the stock investors. Companies need to be accountable and make an annual report. In short, when a company decides to go public and be traded on the stock exchange, it gains a huge advantage. It's raising money from the general public. And in return for this advantage, the company must follow a series of rules and capital market legislation. And all of this is to make our example clear. The difference between gold and shares is huge. They are two different creatures. Despite both of them being financial assets, they are of different classes. Similarly, Bitcoin and crypto are completely different asset classes. And if you're thinking that this is just a subjective interpretation only found on Bitcoin maximalist blogs, do your own research and you'll find that a long time ago, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States expressed itself as viewing Bitcoin as a type of asset. And this is different from cryptos, which are securities that capture money from the general public, investing with the expectation of making a profit. That's why Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin is the only decentralized, scarce digital currency. All the other innovations that come from certain cryptocurrencies are only tiny variations compared to the big innovation that is Bitcoin. And due to the network effect, it makes no sense for a new competitor to simply reinvent the wheel and imitate Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the first scarce, decentralized cryptocurrency that made it, and it didn't come out of nowhere. The idea of creating a private digital currency without government participation is very old. In 1983, David Chaum had already thought about eCash and DigiCash, which came to form major partnerships with banks and technology companies. However, he didn't go forward because it was too early for his time. In 1998, when the internet was still in the infancy, Wade I proposed the creation of a digital currency called B-Money, an electronic means of payment that was independent of the government. And in B-Money, people would need to identify themselves, much like our use of paper money, paper cash, to make purchases. Also in 1998, Nick Szabo proposed a decentralized digital currency called Bitcode. And Bitcode didn't need intermediaries to carry out a financial transaction. All these different ideas from the end of the 20th century couldn't be implemented because the technology was still lacking. They didn't solve the problem of double spending. The double spending problem needs to be resolved in a decentralized way, in a very simplified way. What is a double spending problem? Now imagine a metal coin in your hand, and the physical coin disappears from your hand when you buy an ice cream. And you give the possession of the coin to the person selling you the ice cream. However, a digital currency presents an extra challenge for everyone in order to ensure that you're only able to spend your money once. Because digital information can be copied infinitely. For example, when you take a selfie and you send that photo to your mother, to your aunt, and to the school group on a social network, you're copying information. And the digital copy is perfect. So obviously a digital currency cannot use the same technology. Imagine the problems of money that you could duplicate with copy-paste. A digital currency cannot be the same as a file that you save on your computer and you copy as many times as you like. It is, therefore, necessary to implement a special procedure to avoid double spending. Otherwise, people can spend the same digital money over and over again, either maliciously trying to defraud on purpose or even unintentionally, accidentally. And there are only two solutions to avoid double spending: centralized architecture or decentralized architecture. Let's first talk about the centralized version. The centralized architecture for money already exists, and you already use it in your daily life. The centralized solution to avoid double spending is to have a trusted authority, a leader, a center. This authority centralizes power, possessing the right to determine when the spending of a digital currency is legitimate and when someone is trying to double spend, either with a fraudulent intent or even by accident. The authority of trust in the centralized architecture is then the supreme entity in the chain of command of centralized money. It is the owner of the video game who decides whether you can play or not. This authority is in charge and has the power to choose between the first transaction that could be approved and what are the duplicate transactions that should be cancelled. The centralized solution is pretty easy to understand and it is pretty easy to implement. However, that would be centralizing power, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do with our money revolution. There is no innovation in this example. Centralized digital money already exists. You already have it. It is the money that you have when you view your internet banking balance. It is the money you use when you pay with a credit card. It is the money you use on PayPal. It is not innovative to be creating a centralized cryptocurrency. Using Puppycat coin is not so different from using US dollars or Turkish lira. They all have central authorities who can change monetary policy at any time. Now, Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin stands alone. Bitcoin has taken a giant leap of innovation by offering a decentralized solution. Decentralized architecture for money is as transformative as the discovery of fire. The invention or discovery of decentralized money that Bitcoin brought to the world is a complete change. It is impacting many dimensions of our lives. And keep watching, I'll give you the link to the source of big investors who compared the arrival of Bitcoin to the invention of the wheel. In 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto published an article, the famous Bitcoin White Paper. And the Bitcoin White Paper brought an innovation that was the time chain. Now, time chain? Yes, that's right. Maybe you know the word blockchain. It is a term that unfortunately has been used and abused by scammers. Now, when we talk specifically about Bitcoin, one idea, one suggestion is to use the word time chain, just like Satoshi Nakamoto used to do. Time chain is an immutable public record system that uses a decentralized network to replace middlemen and to prevent the double spending problem. In addition to decentralization, Bitcoin has programmed scarcity that makes the currency strong. If there is an owner, the new project will be centralized. And if it requires expensive resources, the network will be centralized. Bitcoin is used as a reference point for the thousands of cryptocurrencies that come after it. They're trying to evolve from it. Now, merely the fact that there are founders who can be sued or force changes on the network, that is already a factor of centralization. It is indicating that they can change the rules of the game at any moment. But beyond that, cryptos that promise innovations, they end up centralizing the network. To offer more functionality, cryptocurrencies become centralized. When there are added resources, only very, very expensive supercomputers can be used to validate the network. And in addition, they need very high speed connections, much higher than the speed of the internet that you have at home. If you want to see the technical specifications, you can check out the report published by James Dunlop detailing how difficult it is for individuals like you and me to run these networks nodes. Therefore, only a few rich participants can validate the network of a centralized crypto. On the other hand, Bitcoin is purposely kept lighter, so anyone can use an old computer with slow internet access and still participate by validating the network. That is right. With an old computer, a normal internet connection, you can have a complete copy of all transactions on the Bitcoin network. And this is impossible in centralized networks that need supercomputers and ultra-fast internet connections. In the decentralized model, you don't have to ask anyone for authorization. You connect directly to the network. There is greater security. Nick Szabo has a very good quote where he explains that in centralized money, you need an army of accountants, investigators, and lawyers. But in the decentralized money, you only need an army of computers. Rather than relying on a central authority that you need to trust, mathematics and game theory make the network safe. This is one of the characteristics of decentralization. Also, almost every difference that other cryptocurrencies promise can be incorporated into Bitcoin later, if it is really a useful idea. When money is centralized, it is not really your money. Only decentralized money gives you sovereignty. To be absolutely sure that you understand the main point of our conversation, let me check if you've already got it. What is the reason that we talk so much about decentralization and removing intermediaries? It is that today, when you buy something, you need to have permission from whomever runs the system. Your bank, the card operator, or the government. This power holder always enforces his rules. He's capable of kicking you out of the system at any time or blocking access to your money. If they suffer an attack, the centralized entity can lose your money. They can lose your personal data. For example, if you are prosecuted, even though you are completely innocent, the judge may decide to preemptively freeze all your bank accounts until the case is solved. A feature of centralized money is that you have to ask permission to use your money. The real owner of centralized money is the one who has the final word. These money owners will allow you to use the money as long as you follow the rules. At any time, they can block you, inflate the money, or confiscate your money, your centralized money. This vulnerability is an intrinsic and inseparable part of the characteristics of centralized money. In centralized money, there is a master, there is an owner of power, and power corrupts. The owners of power use the power as they please. Understood? This is so important. Here is another example for you to never forget it. If you're traveling, if you want to buy something abroad, your card operator may, for security reasons, decide out of the blue to block your card, even though you already warned the bank that you were going to travel. This happens even without traveling. If you make purchases that the card issuer thinks that are out of the ordinary, they block your card. They don't even apologize for the hassle. Too bad for you. For the card issuer, it is better for you to be angry with a blocked card than it is for them to assume a loss in the case of an eventual fraud. Therefore, out of caution and for your protection, they block your card. This is a beautiful piece of evidence that you don't own your own money because it is centralized. If you have a PayPal account or any other payment intermediary or a card machine in your store to sell products or provide services, and you receive payments there, they may suddenly decide to block your account. This can happen at any time, at their sole discretion. If they think that you received an unusual payment, accessed it from a different computer, or any other crazy idea from their side, they can kick you out. And they do so without apologizing. And you can do nothing. Because, after all, the system is theirs. It's their property. If you have ever tried to buy something on the internet and you received a message that the transaction was not approved, even though you have credit on your card, now you are aware how awful it is to depend on third parties. If the company that processes the payment uses some anti-fraud algorithm, there is a chance that your purchase is considered risky. Your purchase will not be approved by the company that centralizes the payment. Do you understand that? Now, congratulations. You really understand now what are the practical consequences, the problem in your day-to-day, in your life, when you're depending on centralized money. You are at the mercy of the money masters. That is, you're not sovereign. You have to ask permission all the time. You have to apologize for trying to use your money. In a centralized money architecture, you are not the true owner of your money. And Bitcoin is the only decentralized currency, and that offers unique advantages. Bitcoin's architecture has the value of being decentralized, meaning that there is no leader, no central, no single point of vulnerability. Every Bitcoin user has the same amount of power. There is no Bitcoin CEO or any privileged group of founders. On the contrary, groups of a few extremely wealthy individuals have tried to use their influence to modify fundamental characteristics of Bitcoin in order to make the network more centralized. And they failed, as most participants rejected these changes. And on top of all that, the initial distribution of coins is fair. There was a fair initial distribution from the very first moment, as Dan Held explains. A questionable initial distribution is the one where there is a pre-mine. Take the example of Xcoin, a clone of Bitcoin that was created in 2011. Xcoin had a large number of coins sent directly to its creator when it was first mined. And the same is true for virtually all other cryptocurrencies. Founders and early investors get rich by pre-mining, by creating coins from scratch, and then putting the rest up for sale to the general public who join later. When a cryptocurrency has a leader, a charismatic figure, this is a problem, as it is also another sort of centralization. This leader is the one who will be calling the shots, choosing who will be their buddies with privileges. Now, in addition to all of that, many cryptos have a greater degree of complexity as they try to perform functions that they consider to be innovative and not yet tested over time. This is a Silicon Valley's inspired culture of move fast and break things. However, this leaves room for vulnerabilities and hacks. Acting fast and breaking things along the way can be useful for a startup building an entertainment app. But if you're trying to create a global currency where people will store the value that comes from their work, from their lives, from the hours of their lives that they're devoted to making money, it is better to be careful and not break things. And indeed, cryptos act fast and they break things. Do you know what happens when cryptos are hacked? Well, the leaders use often their centralized power to fix problems. For example, this happened with the Ethereum network, which was intentionally altered by its controllers to change the rules of the game and solve a little problem. In 2016, a famous event took place with the moniker of the DAO attack. The Decentralized Autonomous Organization was the first implementation of smart contracts on the Ethereum network. $150 million were invested, but one attentive individual managed to find and run some parts of a badly written contract, and then he diverted a third of that amount to himself. There is a whole discussion, a whole debate whether this was a true hack in the sense of a theft, a breach of security, or whether the contract was simply poorly written with loopholes. Now, this individual simply executed what was in the contract. The programming code itself was not hacked. Now, that's why some people call the event the DAO hack, but others prefer to call it the DAO attack. Now, the important thing of all that story is that there are owners who control Ethereum, and they didn't like what happened. And to solve the problem and to deal with complaints, they created an entire copy of the Ethereum network. It was all the same, except that in this copy, the attack was undone. The money movement didn't happen. They confiscated the money by creating an entire whole new network in which the attacker didn't have access to those funds. Now you might think that this is a good thing, but think about it. We've come a long way. Now you have the necessary knowledge to be able to decide for yourself. This is the whole purpose of the work we do here at Arata Academy. We're providing you with resources and training for you to make conscious choices. For a moment, forget about the specific case of the DAO attack. Just let's think together about centralized architectures in general. Think of the money that is moved in a cryptocurrency with its own blockchain. But in essence, this blockchain is a centralized cryptocurrency. And because it is centralized, it can be edited. It can be modified by a controlling group. This money therefore runs the risk of human interference at any moment. In this case, what is the advantage of using a blockchain? Keeping track of transactions in this way is pretty much like using a public Google Sheets or Excel spreadsheet where everyone can contribute and look. However, there is an owner with the ultimate power to unilaterally edit and make corrections as needed. He can also make simply a complete copy of the whole spreadsheet but go back in time before something unwanted happened. And then tell everyone to abandon the old spreadsheet and just use the new one. The practical value that I finally hope that you understand from this conversation of ours here is that you start paying attention and identifying centering behavior, unilateral decisions, changes that happen because a privileged group of people changed their mind. These are signs that make it very clear that you don't own your own money when you are using a cryptocurrency with centralized power. Now let's make an analogy with fiat money, the US dollar. The money that the government issues is centralized. It is subject to unilateral decisions by the rulers. You can do absolutely nothing if the government decides to change the interest rates or increase inflation. You can't do anything if the government wants to confiscate your money. And similarly, if you buy tokens on a centralized crypto, you can't do anything if they change the rules of the game. Therefore, in a centralized architecture, you need to trust that the leaders, the holders of power, will not deceive you. Now in Bitcoin, this doesn't happen. You don't need to trust any leader because there is no leader. A famous saying from the Bitcoin culture is, don't trust, verify. You can check the network yourself with an old computer. The best way to trust Bitcoin is for you to understand that you don't need to trust anyone, any leader, any centralizing entity. You can just check the code. Without a central authority, you can be sure that your Bitcoin will not be manipulated to satisfy the interests of one person or a small group of people. You can also be sure that the pre-established rules that are known to all will not be suddenly changed. Don't reinvent the wheel. Bitcoin is the first digital currency. One of the biggest investors in the world was writing about Bitcoin, and cryptos used the phrase, "don't reinvent the wheel." This is the reference that I promised that I will be sharing with you. Bitcoin is like the discovery of fire. It is a world-changing innovation. Such an invention cannot be repeated, only copied. With that, it makes no sense for a new competitor to copy Bitcoin. If a new crypto copies Bitcoin making minimal changes, there is no way to compete because Bitcoin has already been on the market longer with more participants, more history. Bitcoin is the first digital monetary good, and it is the first currency in human history that solves the problem of digital scarcity in a peer-to-peer network. When it comes to cryptocurrency, most people think of Bitcoin right away. Likewise, when someone decides to invest in cryptocurrencies, the first step is almost always to buy Bitcoin. This is the network effect in action. As much as other cryptocurrencies, the thousands of cryptocurrencies try, none will be able to be the first successful cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is already positioned with such an advantage that all the thousands of other cryptocurrencies are called altcoins in a market that is alternatives to Bitcoin. In order to gain market share, these altcoins try to introduce some innovations, but these innovations are optional and non-essential to a digital currency, and often not having these optional features is even advantageous for Bitcoin. Now, does this mean that all cryptos are useless? Well, that would be a very strong statement. And the big institutional investors are basically saying that, but with more elegant words. Here's a quote: Bitcoin has found a role in the digital asset ecosystem as a scarce, store of value asset at the very least. The ability for all the other digital assets to fulfill some other necessary use case remains to be seen. Bitcoin has at least proved its utility as a way to digitally store value. The ability of other digital assets to prove their usefulness has not yet occurred. And here's an extra tip. Be cautious when you think that you finally found a crypto that has a use case. It is very easy for a crypto to create any application, adding the compulsory use of tokens as a way for that application to work. They could say that this is an example of use in a blockchain and they can show it's working. However, it is very difficult to justify the reason for using a blockchain, since everything could be done in a way that is more efficient with a private database or even a regular spreadsheet. For cryptos who are trying to prove that they will have real use one day, we can say that dreaming is not forbidden. In fact, it is good to dream and try to innovate. So good luck to all the developers who are working and searching for an alternative, and I hope that they understand the challenges that they're facing. We've already learned one criticism regarding the lack of utility of cryptocurrencies. If the cryptocurrency is centralized, it doesn't need a blockchain. Use of a spreadsheet or a centralized database will suffice. It is both easier and cheaper. Another thing to take note of is when a cryptocurrency says it is faster than Bitcoin. They are comparing their speed performance to the on-chain Bitcoin-based network. Now, first of all, this new crypto manages to have fast speed because it is centralized and it doesn't need to be coordinating multiple points on a decentralized network. And also it is fast because very few people use it. On the day where there is a slightly bigger event like initial token launch, these cryptos are usually slow, congested, and they crash. They're experiencing a downtime of several hours or even several days. But beyond that, it is important for you to understand that Bitcoin architecture does not require the base network to be fast. For greater speed, there are second layer solutions to Bitcoin, and one example of that is the Lightning Network, which is practically instantaneous. And all of this is a mere detail. Let's take a step back and see the whole picture. You don't need to understand all these technical details. You just need to understand and be cautious when you hear arguments stating that their superior cryptocurrencies were launched for one reason or another. As of today, only Bitcoin is decentralized on a global scale, having the ability to incorporate useful future innovations as well. And when you use an altcoin that is not decentralized, you are not the sovereign owner of your money. Creators can change the rules of the game at any moment, inflating the currency by generating more tokens, or creating rules for transactions. They can charge fees or they can even cancel your tokens, forcing you to exchange for a new version of the token that may be worse for you for different reasons. All of this has already happened and will continue to happen because this is a characteristic of centralized currencies. If you've known about crypto for a long time, you might be happy when some cryptocurrencies change their monetary policy overnight and they start to burn coins, reducing the maximum supply. Sounds good, right? After all, reducing the amount of currencies is a deflationary force. But again, this is an example that proves that there is no guarantee of what the monetary policy will be. It is insecure. Even if someone says, the token monetary policy change was decided with a very good governance system, it was not unilaterally decided by a benevolent leader. You have to understand that the same group of people can also approve something that is something you don't like. You will need to trust them so that they don't change things in a way that is worse for you. After all, what is the conclusion of all this? Does that mean that you have to get rid of your crypto bags as they will be worth zero in a little while? I don't know, and no one can answer that. Remember what we said at the beginning. No one has the power to predict the future. We need to have the intellectual humility to recognize that we cannot be absolutely sure of what will happen, especially with regard to the price of assets in which there is speculation. Therefore, even if Bitcoin is the only decentralized currency today and all the other cryptocurrencies are centralized, it's still possible that you will be able to profit from speculation with any of these assets. It all depends on your level of training and future goals. Like it or not, there is a highly speculative market on top of all these digital assets. For example, nothing prevents you from learning how to make short-term buy and sell operations and take advantage of volatility. Even now that you are aware of fundamental weaknesses of centralized cryptos, if you manage your risk, you can speculate and you can profit. It is most important that you understand what you're doing. Anyone who doesn't know what they're doing is a mere gambler. And the gambler can also have profitable results just by sheer luck or because the market is in an uptrend. You need to understand what you're doing to make an informed decision with discipline and well-informed criteria. And I'm glad you made it this far, as now you understand the difference between the various centralized currencies and the only single decentralized currency. You have seen everything so far, investing your time in exchange for knowledge. The knowledge that you now have acquired here about centralized and decentralized networks is the type of information that very few people understand, including those who buy plenty of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies without knowing what they're doing. It is even something that crypto influencers themselves often don't understand. You don't have to leave this little secret between us. Feel free to share it with people that you think might find this type of content valuable. From everything that we've covered so far, it is more than clear that it's too early. We are in a time where very few people understand Bitcoin and cryptos, and that is great for you as you can have an edge on this market. Just understand how Bitcoin works and where the opportunities lie. For all of this, Arata Academy has created an easy-to-understand training on investing called Diamond Hands that you can view at arata.se/Diamond Hands. The great news is that Diamond Hands is a training made in a clearer, more direct and more practical way with easier language than the one that I just used here. Whenever you find great promise in a new cryptocurrency, remember that it likely has pre-mining. It has a group of very few privileged individuals who were the initial investors. They have centralized power. Centralized money can either be a centralized cryptocurrency with charismatic leaders, but it can also be traditional paper money that is issued by governments. The centralized money is not really yours because you are not sovereign. You have no final say. They can change the cryptocurrency rules at any moment. This is not a characteristic of hard currency. Strong currency is the one that you can trust. And the best way to trust is by not needing to trust anyone in particular, as the decentralized network controls itself and prevents abuse without having a single point of weakness. Even in the midst of thousands of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin is the world's first and only successful, scarce, decentralized currency that has the advantage of network effects. It's still too early. We are in a time when very few people understand Bitcoin and cryptos. To get an edge on this market, Arata Academy has a special class for you that you can check right now by going to arata.se/diamond hands.